Paul and Fiona, we've seen how AI makes a lot of mistakes, right? But are AI mistakes any worse than human mistakes? Paul, I'll let you go first.
That's a great question. I mean, I think about that with the Tesla crash example. I mean, there was one Tesla crash, but how many times do we get into our own crashes as human beings? So, yeah, I hear you.
Is it just expectation, do you think? Fiona, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Gartner hype cycle thing that I finished with, I think we think it's going to be fabulous. And just like everything in life, it's tempered, and it still requires humans to be part of the mix. It's not going to take over from us. And I was just saying, the active chronic coitus, okay, that's a bit of a mistake. But I had a typist who, I dictated that I do second opinion work, and I dictated that something was a bit of a trap. And, I always try very carefully to write the second opinions. I don't want to say somebody's got something wrong and that they're an idiot. But the typist typed, "It's a bit of crap." It's a load of crap. It's a load of crap, she typed. And then I had another one where it was, dictated it was a sclerotic bone lesion, and the typist typed an erotic bone lesion. Which I dare say was even better than the active chronic coitus, so,
Matt?
My question's for Ray. In AI, obviously there serves to be great benefits for consumers, but what would the consumers be worried about or scared about that we as clinicians need to really try and proactively address?
I think, and I'm actually speaking probably with my own biases here, that as a consumer, I'd be really concerned that you guys really understood what the risks of AI might be presenting in terms of the outputs. Craig today used a term of the meat computer, talking about the human brain. And I think you need to to understand a bit more about the brain. Now, you guys don't know anything because you work lower down, but there's parts of the human there's parts of the human brain. Pretty much, there's one bit that is the staying alive bit, and everyone here tonight came in and checked out the person next because they're armed with a knife, and you've had a look and know where your knife is and know you can get that quicker than they can use their knife. Now, that's the sort of stuff that's been built in. There's another part of the brain which is the outsourced department, and that's the bit that wants to use anything that will make repetitive tasks easier, AI. And then there's a risk part, but that's ignored by the squishy little bit that I think sits pretty much underneath the male baldness pattern. And that little bit is the bit that ignores risk and says it's got a direct connection to the gut, by the way. My gut tells me I can run across the road. It also tells us a dozen times a day just how clever we are, and reinforces the fact that when we do get some results back from analysis, that it was just what I thought it would be, or if we've hit the button of say go and find something, we can normalise that and say, yeah, that's what I really thought that would be the outcome, and we make that part of our own history. So confirmation bias is an issue that I think really does sit in the equation here. I'm not convinced of aspects of AI in terms of is big better. My interest in this was actually sparked going back to last year's BTB when there was about 4 of the applicants said, we'll write an algorithm. Now, that started a bit cliched and a bit rote to me, and I'm thinking, well, okay, how much do we understand about an algorithm? And we used to call them programs. And we've only got to look at our friends, the economists, and see how good their predictive abilities are, given all the stuff out there. The fact is their model is just not up to scratch. And it can't be because there are just too many variables. And so I think when we might specify what we want done within AI, we can go global or we can go very, very specific. We can have an objective outcome, or we can just hit that button, tell me if there's something we've missed in the past. Now, if we think we're doing better with large data sets and integrating those data sets in what we're doing, I then have an issue about what the cost of that is. These data sets are potentially, there's high attrition rates given that they were assembled years ago with a very different set of objectives around them. And with that attrition, I sort of wonder, with the time spent looking at older data or older MRI pictures or whatever, whether we're really adding much, and we're probably not adding power. We may be increasing our confidence levels in the analysis, but I'm just not sure that we've really thought too much about the effort of AI relative to the benefits. In the generative sense, I used AI just the other night. I had an issue while I was away in Europe, and I had to do an insurance claim, and I wrote 3.5 pages of what I thought was a great description. And I just said, summarise to 1 page, and I got a fabulous piece of work out, which I submitted. So that side of it, I think, is terrific. It has its danger. I wouldn't be putting my own IP in there because I'm not sure where it's going to end up. And that really swings me around to the largest problem I have, and that is if algorithms are expensive to write because they're time consuming, do we get some algorithms off the shelf? Is that algorithm, does it have any residual code because it's been used for something else, a general algorithm? You wouldn't want to be doing Lisa's lipid studies and find that there was a bit of code for looking at the fat content of goat cheese previously. So I'm just a bit cautious again about the for-profit ownership of both algorithms and in particular data sets, where I don't know that if you ask the AI to do something that you cannot see inside. That is proprietary, owned by Google or whatever, and you're not going to see inside. I laughed the other day when I saw that our military strategy is going to be done by working with Amazon's computers. Well, does that mean that I can get a drone strike by 8 p.m. tomorrow night on my next door neighbour? I hope so. So I think there are barriers, and it just comes down, quite frankly, for ANZUP. I think we need some hard protocols, hard procedures to say who we can interact with, how many companies we might interact with, how much we trust them. Putting the consumer hat on again, these large data sets and setting it tasks, I am concerned that we start to overdiagnose and overtreat. Now, I haven't ever had a satisfactory answer to that. And so they're little bits and pieces, pretty random, but my understanding of where AI might impact clinical trials and ANZUP in particular. But I'd also like to, seeing everyone else has sort of shared the fun bits of AI and the mistakes and things. Just before Christmas, I had, this is very personal, but I know I'm amongst friends. In fact, a lot of people here interacted with me with this thing. I had a lump found in a certain part of my nether regions, and which resulted in some surgery and some additional surgery, and I'm seeing one of our number. And I asked ChatGPT to, I first asked, put this into Shakespearean lingo, and that was pretty interesting. But then I said, okay, sum this up for me in a limerick. And this without very much prompting at all. Righty and lefty a pair, hung together everywhere. Now lefty has vanished, to the lab he's been banished. Now righty's left as the spare.
Nice one, Ray. I think if the world didn't have all my data, I would not be given advertising for eye blush, right? Do you think it's... my data's already out there. Andrew Weikart, question.
A question about validation of AI-generated research. Apart from validating AI models in separate data sets, which is an obvious way of looking at, is this relatively predictive and useful, who do you think should audit those AI generative models, and do you think the expertise is there to make it transparent, valid, and trustworthy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the good thing about medical AI is it's actually a lot more regulated, and it's going to be a lot more regulated than AI in other fields, just because it's had to go through, TGA, FDA, European regulation to be able to be in the market. So I think to your point about the data and how old you're using and what what data you're actually retrieving. So for the model that I've just trained, we use 70,000 different patients, so not 70,000 slides, but 70,000 different patients, and they were from the last 3 years. So they're not old data. So I think that's really important, that you're looking at particular data that you're going to be, and in the population you're planning on deploying. Then, as you say, Andrew, it needs to be, so that's your training set. That has to be completely isolated from your test set, because otherwise you end up with overfitting of the data, and you can't have a test set that confirms the findings that you used for training. So you actually need a completely different set to do your test set. And then the regulators want to see that data. They actually want to see the test set that's actually been for their population. So FDA is very strict with this, for example, and TGA is actually quite close to FDA with how they follow. So in some other jurisdictions, you can do self-declaration right now, which I think will, in the next few years, will actually disappear. So I think it's actually on the colleges now to really start thinking about how they're going to regulate a lot of this. So because radiology and pathology have had a lot more exposure to using AI and the products are out there already, they've already moved a bit faster. And so there's quite a good document written by the College of Radiologists in this country about how you would go about doing this and recommending external oversight. The problem is, as you say, a commercial model, they're not going to want you to see the secret sauce under the hood, because each algorithm, is their IP, and it's taken them a long time to derive it, and usually quite a lot of money as well. So it's a balance there between allowing the commercial entities to be able to have their secret sauce that doesn't get looked into, but also be able to have oversight. And every time, as I was alluding to before, every time there's been something change in the algorithm, like there's been, so talking to the first prostate algorithm, which has been out for a few years now, which is FDA approved, talking to the pathologist who was heavily involved in that, he said that, they let this algorithm out and it was working, but now they've got a lot more data from it being used around the world in different contexts, and the algorithm's actually doing different things. So he was really surprised that there's been a shift in the algorithm. And, I think that's, a lot of this is sort of we're feeling our way, but the regulation needs to go with it. So I think all the colleges need to really be thinking about how they're going to advise and support members to understand how that, you can be using AI, or you should be where you should be careful. Our documents I've just finished writing it with the panel of AI people, and it's gone into the College of Pathologists now. But yeah, I think really it's the next step is some external recommendations.
Paul, do you think AI at the moment, or maybe for the foreseeable future, is like a resident or fellow in like your training, and at the beginning you're going to have a lot of oversight, bit of hand-holding, checking on the work, and then eventually you can have enough confidence that you'll let that person have a bit more autonomy, but then at a risk. And you think that's a fair kind of analogy?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think about things like, like Fiona's talking about the Artera algorithm, that it's out there now, and I'm relying on it in my clinic, and I know it's going to make mistakes sometimes, but I do think that ultimately it's probably better than my own gut feeling, like Ray was talking about, that gut. Does this patient need ADT or not? I feel more confident to have an algorithm I know it's going to be wrong sometimes, but it's probably going to be more right than I am. So I think I've reached that point with some of these things where, I think we've watched it, and it's probably okay to let it do its thing, but we still have to be a little bit skeptical.
And then the other thing I'm worried about is kind of like a resident, a really smart resident, a lot of book knowledge, who doesn't want to say I don't know. You know, I feel as though the more senior I become, the more comfortable I am in saying I don't know, because I know what I know, and if I don't know it, I'm not embarrassed about it, right? I can say I don't know. And this AI feels like it's embarrassed to say I don't know.
Yeah, that was scary to see Fiona's examples of hallucinations and made up references. I mean, that's terrifying.
Agree.
Fiona, when you're designing your bits and pieces for pathology, is there a possibility for the algorithm to say I don't know?
It's difficult because it's trained on pattern recognition. If it doesn't recognise the pattern, then it doesn't know, right? So sometimes it's difficult, you know. So for example, I'm having a bit of trouble with invasive high-grade urothelial carcinoma in the prostate right now. Don't tell anybody. But, you know, it's doing all right with papillary low-grade tumours because they all stick up and they look obviously like a urothelial tumour. But, you know, we don't have a lot of cases of high-grade invasive, and so it's calling it all Gleason pattern 5, right? And, okay, well, that's a problem, but it's going to flag it to the pathologist, and the pathologist should see it and go, it is something. Like, it's flagging it as something, but it's miscalling it, right? And so that then is an education piece for any pathologist using the tool to be able to say, well, it's flagged it as malignant, but you as the pathologist need to review and say, I'm not just going to blanketly call this, you know, Gleason pattern 5 just because the algorithm has called it Gleason pattern 5, right? You know, it's correctly called it out as a malignancy, but it's misclassified it because I don't have enough examples of high-grade invasive urothelial carcinoma or prostate core biopsy. You know, so I think, and that's actually something we're looking at now, like how do you train a model for something that's rare? You know, that you don't have, I need at least 100 examples of anything to train a model, right? To be able to recognise it reliably. And if it's got a lot of variability, then I need more examples. So how do you do that when you've got, like, somebody said to me, you also do sarcoma, so is that your next product? And I laughed. I thought, well, sarcoma's rare, and the sarcomas that are there are so variable, it's not going to be my next product, and it might not be for some time yet, but I can see in the future that there will be ways around this. And that's where we need to sort of look at how do we actually make the AI model better and train better for these things that we've got certain things it's working well for, but, you know, other things it's not. And I think as a person using it, you need to know that there are things it's not going to work for.
Ray, just a quick one. We've got Helen.
Yeah, I'd just like to know whether you do a cost-benefit analysis for the time that you spend training a model to do some things that you might be able to use that time better or more cost-effectively.
I'm certainly know for the other half of my week I'm missed when I'm not there. So when I go back on a Wednesday morning, there's a stack of stuff on my desk where people have got written help on the top of it. But I think in the long term, it'll be helpful for people who are working in isolation so that you've got no one to show it to, right? Like, so I work in a big group with 75 pathologists, and so, you know, it's the biggest lab in the Southern Hemisphere. You can show things, there's somebody there, right? But if you were a junior pathologist and you were stuck in a country town and you were looking at something and there was nobody to show it to, it's a safety mechanism, you know, for those people. They can go home and sleep at night knowing that they haven't misdiagnosed somebody, they haven't missed something. You know, those sorts of things are helpful. So yes, to me personally, it's probably costing, you know, well, for my lab, it's probably costing a lot of money for me to be there, but I can see benefits, you know, in the long term, you know. And I think the problem is that, you know, we've got an ageing population. You know, coming up, there's going to be a lot more disease that's going to require diagnosis. We're not training enough people to do the work. So we're actually going to get to a stage where we actually need a bit more help. And financially then it's going to be a lot more viable. And in Australia, you know, honestly, we've got enough pathologists. We're actually doing pretty well compared to all the other countries. If you look at the number of pathologists per capita, it's actually the best in this country. But you start looking at places like NHS where it takes you 5 weeks to get your biopsy back, right? And if your AI can say, well, this one's got cancer, do this one first, you know, even just prioritising your work list. Yeah, triage. You know, there's lots of things that are beneficial, you know, for situations where you're going to have low resourcing. And the reason I work with the company that I'm doing the AI with is they do a lot of work with underserved nations. And they started with radiology first, and there's a place in Vietnam where there's no radiologists. So they actually were able to provide a CT scanner, and the algorithm reads the CT for them when they don't have a radiologist. Now, it's not ideal. You would ideally have a radiologist there to do that, but somewhere where there is no radiologist, the AI companies paid for the CT scanner for them to be able to be functional and actually get some diagnostic work done. So, you know.
Helen?
Thanks, Ben. I never thought I'd be thinking quite so much about your abdomen, in attending a Ends Up meeting, but great to be here. I, oddly enough, heard a talk last night on AI at another great dinner, completely different focus, but one of the things they were talking about was Australia's been very reticent to embrace AI relative to OECD countries. And so it was really interesting to hear your talk, particularly Fiona, on you training a model. And I just wondered whether at the moment will it be good to get an insight into how much AI is being used by our health system. I get the impression we're all using AI a fair bit. We're not really thinking of it as AI as our documents being edited as we write. But it'd be interesting to know how much it is already being incorporated in radiology and pathology services.
About a third of chest x-rays in Australia have got an AI assist tool being used currently with them. In pathology, there are some practices currently, some smaller labs have actually started using AI. There's a couple of labs with not that many pathologists, and so it helps them to have another sort of second opinion, to another look at the slides. Yeah, you're right. Realistically, in Australia, we are actually behind. And I think part of that in pathology is because we're not digitised, so it's actually an extra step. So you have to make your slides and then you have to scan them. Whereas in radiology, it's actually easier because everything's already, imaged, and it's on it's a digital image. So for pathology, there's a spend. You've actually got to have, a scanner. You've got to have somebody who mans the scanner. The scanner producers say, oh, it's very robust, but the scanners actually fall over all the time, and we actually have to have a lot of troubleshooting. So I think, Australia, you're right, is absolutely behind. But look, it's coming, and I think it's coming really quickly for the imaging specialties, whether that's radiology or pathology, the image-based ones. And I think it will be coming for other specialties too, but a little bit behind.
Interesting. In the United States, Paul, you presented some things, but in your practice, do you implement? Do you utilise some AI?
Yeah, we're definitely doing AI auto contouring, and we're trialing it right now, and it speeds things up for sure.
Yeah. Paul?
I look forward to AI, Ben. Fiona, you were giving the example of the AI not being able to recognize a certain form of cancer, and the pathologist then falls back and uses it as a learning experience. Do you think that over a few generations, there's a risk that pathologists will lose the experience that you've built up over years and years of doing it manually to not then know what to do when the AI is making a mistake?
Yeah, I think there's always a risk when you start using tools that you might over-rely upon them. And I think for trainees it's going to be quite interesting as to how they learn. I think there is a risk if the AI starts telling you, like if you rely upon the AI and you're looking at the AI and you're going, okay, show me the prostate cause, show me where everything is. For me, I actually like to look at the cause first, make up my own mind, and then run the AI model across it so that I'm actually getting a confirmation of what I've already decided. But I know other people do it the other way, and I think that is a risk, and that's why I don't do it that way. I don't like to just let the AI tell me because I feel I will be biased. And even with the model that I've been involved in training, I don't trust it completely. And I think that's the thing to be not sure. You have to be not sure that the model is going to be perfect. It's there to help, like everything else.
This is where Rob Hamilton once told me a good RPLD surgeon can become a good robotic RPLD surgeon, but someone who's not been trained to do an open RPLD probably even though you're training starting with a... Oh, no, I can't remember what you said, Rob, but it made sense. Lisa.
I just want to pick up more on that point, because the universities are waging war on the Chat GPT and all of these sorts of things. But what you're describing is, I'm thinking about having just come from the FRACP exams, and we're asking all these physician trainees to read the chest X-ray. Well, not even the radiologist is going to read the chest X-ray. How are you going to incorporate this? Why do the pathology registrars have to do their exams without AI if they're going to report their whole lives with AI?
Because the AI gets it wrong. So they have to be able to do it. I mean, it still relies upon the pathologist. So the AI is helpful. It speeds things up. It does, pre-populates your reports. It does calculations. But, I've seen it calculate the involvement. 90% of the core is involved. Well, actually, that bit's post-atrophic hyperplasia, and it's only 5% of the core involved, So you need to be able, you still have to be the person that makes the decisions, right? The AI is there to help, but not to actually tell you.
Well, maybe I'll throw it to Ben. As a physician, that's the pathologist's view. But we're asking a whole pile of people to do things that we're not prepared to do anymore.
Yep.
And that's how we decide whether they're going to be specialists.
Yeah. I've very distinct views on this. I'm not going to talk about them because they're kind of really depressing. Chris.
First thing, there's only one Ben Tran, and we don't want you to change. So actually, I'm going to try and take this to a 30,000-foot view. When would we say AI is successful? Is it because the radiologist and the pathologist get home a little bit earlier? Or we actually have decreased futile therapy and more patients get accurate treatments and diagnoses and healthcare costs go down? What are we actually really trying to get out of this is probably my provocative question.
Paul, do you want to talk about your experience thus far? And whether he was saying how to make things quicker?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's the greater efficiency side, Chris, and doctors' lives are going to get better. But I think the real promise is with patients getting more accurate therapy, like the predictive AI. To the extent that AI can predict which patients will benefit from which therapy, I think that's where the jackpot is right now. And I think we're starting to see that, which is great.
Are we talking about that? Is the end goal? I'm not hearing it yet.
Well, a lot of it has been just discrimination to start out with, and prognosis. That's always step one. But prediction, I think, is really where the money is, and that has to be based off of looking back retrospectively at randomized trials and then going forward and validating it prospectively in randomized trials. So that's going to take some time.
When you're 100% accurate, like Paul and I, Fiona, you can't really improve upon that.
Thank you so much for the engaging session tonight. It's been really interesting. I want to ask a controversial question. Are we taking too much of a today view, a snapshot in time? We've heard a lot of conversation today about the fact that, AI is never going to replace the person, but AI will provide the assistance. But when we've trained the AI to have the sufficient amount of good data, futuristic look, is there a future possible where actually we don't need the human?
This is my view that it's really negative. And then we just all de-skill, right? And then we become extinct. Okay, too negative?
Circular argument.
Any comments?
I don't know that we can predict the future, which would be great. Maybe we can make an AI algorithm that could do that.
But you showed how fast it's advancing, even in image generation.
Yep.
So the question is, are our human brains,
The question is, are our human brains unable to predict what's actually truly possible, given how much we've advanced in just a few years?
Yeah, I think it's not that crazy, Sam. I think it's a good thought. I mean, one of my MBA classmates is running a startup where basically they're creating an AI therapist So an AI, you can tell all your problems to the AI therapist, and they'll come back at you with emotive responses, and they'll help you through whatever your problem is, because it's so hard to get a therapist these days. And if that works, then there it is. You know, the thing that we think is the hardest thing to replace, the emotion, the human connection, they're trying to put onto an AI right now.
I think the difficulty is actually predicting exactly where the AI is going to be completely successful and not. So if you think about people predicting, say for 2000, they were thinking there were going to be flying cars, you know, and that obviously hasn't happened, right, in this time frame. But nobody would have predicted smartphones and how much they've taken over people's lives and how addicted everybody is to their
Star Trek was
smartphone.
right.
Yeah. So some things are right, and I think the difficulty is knowing exactly. Like we can think about like a sort of blue sky and think, oh well, it could do everything, and it possibly could, but it's going to be some things that you probably can't predict right now. Will go, you know, suddenly there'll be something that, like smartphones, that have just taken off completely, compared to the flying car, which just hasn't happened.
Sam, I think we will de-skill in basic skills, right? So my kids can't go to a library and look up a book or anything, right? They would have no idea how to do that. I think they would anyway. And so, but that's not relevant now, but is it going to be relevant? I don't know. And so the same thing here, if AI takes on a large proportion of what we do, yes, I think as doctors, in future generations, we'll de-skill in certain things. But is that going to be important? I guess if CrowdStrike has an issue, then maybe it is important, but I don't know.
Yes, I had to type on Friday night. I haven't done that for ages. I was very slow.
Michael?
We're at the ANZUP Cancer Trials group meeting, and clinical trials are getting harder and harder to do, mainly because of bureaucracy and so much paperwork. Do you think we can feed the GCP manual into ChatGPT and it can take over and be the solution for this problem so that we can actually just focus on the clinical question rather than bureaucracy?
Craig has an answer for you, Michael, because I don't want to be told off by our overlords.
Oh, sorry, is it the cream? I think it's here. I've got a problem with a trial that is not part of ANZUP, and I wrote a clinical trial protocol, patient information consent form ECRF, in 2 hours with ChatGPT, and it's a very short, very simple, very basic thing, but you stop and look through it and you think, okay, it's a good start. And then okay, I need this bit, and it's sort of okay. It's rough enough. So I think as a start for many of these things, I think it's there. And I mean, who's using AI dictation, or at least trying some AI dictation? Hands up. Who's using AI dictation? Yeah? I've just been using it for 2 or 3 weeks, and I can already see it's going to pre-populate or help us pre-populate ECRFs. It's going to absolutely change how we do things.
Oh, you have a question?
My final question to ChatGPT was, how can Ben Tran get strong abs with least work as possible?
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, yeah.
It says, Ben Tran can efficiently strengthen his abs by consistently performing core-focused exercises like planks and crunches.
Easy.
Incorporating HIIT workouts and maintaining a healthy diet. So there's the secret for
Nothing about AI and cameras and shit like that? Nothing. No, all right. Thanks, Matt. And thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Paul, Fiona, Ray, thank you. Great questions. I think AI is here to stay, right? And we've just got to find a way to adopt and use it and help us.
Oh, go on.
And help our patients. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.